raise your hand if you're a student. Okay. What about starting a business, looking to start a business? Okay, what about you just started a business, you're looking to grow and scale? All right, so a smattering of each. Okay, so I think you guys know where we are. So AJ, I'm going to start with you. Can you give us a perspective, or your perspective as an entrepreneur, on some of the roadblocks that you faced individually in your business, and some of the roadblocks that your fellow entrepreneurs have faced as they've formed and tried to grow their businesses as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Quick show of hands here, really quickly. Who here has ever been poor before? Okay, all right. I know I'm in LA. All right, really poor and really broke. All right. Okay. It makes you pretty creative, doesn't it? For those of you who didn't raise your hand, I recommend you try poverty. Because, no, seriously, I mean, you'll be surprised how motivated it makes you. And how creative it'll make you. So, my learnings, I'm just going to be a straight shooter. We started the company, no money, literally, sleeping on my mama's couch. I was, started another company a few years before, did well, sold that, had a little bit of money from the exit, was doing consulting, and then the Great Recession hit. It was like, bam, what am I going to do, right? I could go and work at Target. I could go work at Starbucks. I mean, I was definitely marketable, but couldn't make coffee. That's one. So maybe I couldn't work at Starbucks. But anyways, but I think the biggest lesson that I learned is that you got to be able to sell. You got to be able to get early traction, and I never hesitated. We grew this business up to its first $1 million purely just by going in and calling on companies.
Yeah, but let me challenge you a little on that. So it sounds like you started, you stuck with it, you went with it, and it's grown. But surely you faced some issues, right? I mean, acquiring customers, for example, right?
Absolutely.
How hard was that, right? Convincing people to use your service, how hard was that? Talk about a few of those things.
It's hard, and it depends on who you are. You may be an engineer, and sales is not your skill set. I'm not an engineer. I was a salesperson by trade, so it wasn't that hard for me. But I'll tell you what was hard for me. I think the hardest part in being an entrepreneur and going from, that startup is that emotional feeling that you have that first day it's like, they say entrepreneurship is jumping off a cliff and building the plane on the way down, right? You got to be comfortable with that. And it's that emotional, can you be comfortable with that, not knowing where that paycheck is going to come from? That's the first hurdle. That's the first one. So.
Great. Natalie?
Can you get people who are willing to jump in not knowing and being trusting of you that paycheck is coming? I think that's a huge thing, that you have to not only be a great salesperson or a great engineer or whatever it is, but you also, if you're employee 1 to 20 at any startup, you also have to have a desire to be a great leader as well.
So can you maybe talk to us or provide some information from the perspective of a VC, right? So you've got lots of companies in your portfolio, and you see a variety of the issues that they face. So from the VC perspective, what are some of the roadblocks that you're dealing with and that you're assisting your portfolio companies with?
Well, I think the biggest one that we've been focused on lately is product market fit, because I think there's a lot of people that have incredible products, but there's no market for them, and I think a lot of people don't figure that out soon enough. So we always ask about what the market size is and try to establish that right away. In our case, because we're dealing with technology for kind of real estate in the built world specifically, it's a little bit of a unique setup, because the problem with so much of this is like there's 200 apps that can open a hotel room door. Like, the barrier to entry in the world that we're dealing with is not like the technology is really hard. It's which of these is Marriott going to choose to deploy in all of their hotel rooms. And so what we saw over and over and again was that it didn't matter if you were the best technology. It only mattered if you had the relationships with, which is what we come in and try to offer, but then the ability to scale fast enough and have that traction and sort of have a team that could stand up to a really fast deployment. Because when you work with Fifthball, you're also then getting into bed with Lennar and Prologis and these sort of like biggest owners and operators in the space, and you have to be able to scale quickly, and a lot of teams just aren't prepared to do that.
Okay, so let's say you've invested in a portfolio company. Marriott's interested in their technology, right? The team is experienced but not necessarily ready to scale and grow. How does Fifth Wall come in and provide the expertise, experience, guidance, et cetera, to assist that team in overcoming that hurdle?
So we we didn't at first have a sort of dedicated team, so it was just our investment professionals that were doing both. We have, in the past year, actually put together an advisory practice that is designed to help the portfolio companies once we say, like, hey, Open Door, you should be talking to Lennar, whatever that sort of partnership is, that helps on both sides of the equation to actually deploy that. So we have a day-to-day team who's doing, weekly, sometimes daily calls to, like, actually navigate. We hired, an incredible guy from McKinsey who's deals with change management in organizations. Like, there's so many roadblocks to, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're focused on sort of like getting it done, being solution oriented. Like, those are the type of people that I like to hang out with. But you're also dealing with people inside a very large organization who have inertia and are resistant to change. And so how do you help those people understand each other? And I think that language of translation is something that we've actually put dedicated, they're not investors. They're just people who help consult and navigate and like actually push those partnerships over the line so that they can actually be impactful on both sides.
Great. AJ, you have not taken venture capital financing, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so you don't have Natalie on your team providing a dedicated, team, right, to help you with some of these solutions. So
I'm missing out, though. Clearly.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
So what are some of the resources that you relied on, right, when you were going through your path and growing and scaling your business? You didn't have a VC, so who else did you go to, right? What resources did you consult?
Yeah, well, this is a great question, and I think VCs offer a lot of value. And I think if you a lot of times proven teams can acquire VC capital a lot easier. And we didn't do this. This is the first tech company I had started. One of the things that I'll give them a plug. I was a member of EO and EO Accelerator. And they had a team of mentors. EO stands for Entrepreneurs Organization, and they had a basically. I met other entrepreneurs through that, but these were individuals who were there, who have done it. Individual friend of mine, Mike Cato, who ran a company, sold it to Grubhub a few years ago, and he mentored me and said, "Hey, AJ, you got to build your team. You've got to hit your quarterly goals." I mean, got me serious about being a business. So I surrounded myself with other entrepreneurs who have been there and done that and were proven. And that, I think, got me serious about how I'm going to do this. So that was big.
Okay, so I'm going to put some pop culture in here and ask you guys to respond to this question. Natalie, you first. So, you've heard the phrase, if you build it, they will come, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs are thinking, I've got this great idea, and I'm going to get it done, and I'm going to show the market why they should be using my product. So what do you think about if you build it, they will come?
I don't think it's true.
Okay, why not?
It's certainly, there's exceptions that prove the rule, but I think you have to have a target use customer, for whatever you're building. You're building ultimately for a client. Somebody's going to pay for your service, or somebody, in the media world is going to pay to put ads on your website. You ultimately have to service a customer no matter what you're doing. And so if you don't have that customer in mind and aren't insatiably focused on whatever is going to get that customer over the line, then it doesn't work. I haven't seen an example where somebody created a market or was solving a problem that didn't exist before. Like, the problem exists and people just haven't solved it yet.
Any additional thoughts, AJ?
Yeah, I mean, she's right on line, and I'll give you an example of how we did that. We sell software to government agencies, and I actually went in and, it's kind of like, if you build it, they will come. I was kind of like, well, I showed it on PowerPoint, but it wasn't built yet, and I sold it on the PowerPoint. We went into the city of Los Angeles, and I was actually pitching them something completely different. I was pitching them a platform to connect all these programs that they had. And the guy stopped me in the middle of the presentation and said, AJ, this is great, but we don't need that. But he goes, this is what I need. And if you build this for me and solve this problem, I'll give you a contract. But you got to build it first. So we ended up building the software for him and got a $40,000 contract, and that was my startup money, And so I totally agree with that, and Natalie's right on, and it's how it works.
I think just as important as the resource of working with entrepreneurs and having that networking base is also making an effort to find the people that are going to be the decision makers on the other end, to your example, and talking to them as you're developing your product to say, is this in line with what you need? Like, what feature sets would you, as much as possible, and you can have those candid conversations before you're actually in a room pitching, or you spend, God forbid, time and money building something that no one needs. Mm-hmm. I think use both your peers and then the people that are sort of in the circle around, the halo around your startup, to actually pull in that insights.
Okay, so let's explore that a little more because I think it's critical. So one aspect of that is decision makers in connection with maybe large customers, right? So to the extent that you're going to enterprises,
Sure.
you need to talk to decision makers. But another aspect may simply be the actual end user, right?
Yeah.
The folks who are going to use your product, right? So any recommendations, suggestions, guidance regarding how to really hone in on what those people are interested in, right? What the problem is that they need solved, and whether or not your solution is addressing, right, those concerns, right? Because in my opinion, the more that you can tailor your product and service to the end customer, right, the more likely you're going to have users and you're going to have rapid growth, et cetera. So suggestions, any conversations regarding how do you hone in on exactly what your ultimate customer, right, is looking for, and how they use your product and whether or not they're going to continue to use it.
Would you like me to go first?
I'll go first.
The way I looked at that is that if you can solve a high value problem for a company or a business or a consumer, then you're on the right track, basically. If you can solve a high value problem. And what we did is we went out and we realized that these government nonprofit agencies didn't have a good way of showing the ROI on all the money that us taxpayers give them. They didn't have a good way of doing that. And that was a high value problem. And so we were able to go in there. But, I always believe it's, you don't have a company if you get an LLC. You don't have a company if you've raised money. You have a company as soon as a customer pays you for that service. There's no better validation than getting a check from a customer. Once you get a check from a customer, you go, aha, someone needs this, right? And then you get 2, and you're like, you know what, I'm on to something. 3 and 4, and that's traction, right? That's when you have a company, and that's when you started to prove that you can solve a problem.
Yeah, on a very tactical level, there's a woman, Claire Ramsey, I'm pretty sure her company is called Commune in LA, and she puts together focus groups for brands, for people developing products, she will find you 12, 17-year-old males who are, she basically can back into finding these sort of whales of people that are the target customers so that you can have an actual conversation with them about their wants and needs. But I would hope, if you're a startup and you're developing a product, that you have made an effort to sort of talk to those consumers and understand kind of where it is. But there are definitely, Claire's one of them, but there are a bunch of people that will help you put together research or focus groups, and that's not free, but I think you can also go to your networks and say, I really want to understand this problem. Do you know somebody that fits this psychographic or whatever it is?
Right. I think that speaks to just doing your homework, right, essentially. So you do your diligence, right?
Yes, do your diligence.
You've got the organization of your company and building that, but then you've got all of this other external stuff that is necessary to make that successful. Yeah. Okay, so you've gotten a customer, right, and maybe you've gotten a second customer, right? So let's talk about now gaining additional traction and growing and scaling. How patient do you think you need to be, right? And the reason I ask that question is because, how long is too long to wait before you take action to make change, right? Sometimes it's just a matter of waiting and, again, it'll scale linearly, maybe a little exponentially. Other times it's you're waiting, you've got customer 1, you've got customer 2, and you're growing very slowly, but you're not doing the things that are necessary to really ramp that growth, right? So what are your thoughts about how patient, an entrepreneur needs to be? How long should they be waiting, right, to see results before determining that they need to take some action to ramp growth?
I would be trying to ramp growth the entire time. It's like, also, when you're an entrepreneur, they say, always be fundraising. It's the same conversation. You should always be thinking about growth. If you're not thinking about growth, I would be scared about the company. I think a slightly different question is how to know if it's not working and, then identifying what that problem is and deciding if, we should just abandon this idea or we should double down on this or we should pivot or, those are, I think, harder conversations. But to me, you want to always be trying to build traction with your company. That's the lifeblood of, not only how you continue to grow revenue, but how your product set continues to evolve because you're getting that constant feedback from your customers.
Yeah, it's a great answer. And I'd say, how long is your bank account?
Yeah.
We used to joke, my CFO and I used to joke, we'd be like, okay, we have enough money for 30 days. And then we were like, now we got enough money for a quarter. And now we got enough money for a year. I've got 2 of my employees in the thing, so we got enough money for a couple of years, guys. We're okay. But that's at the end of the day, it's exactly what Natalie said. You always have to be either, fundraising or selling.
I think we're almost at the end, so practical advice, thoughts, any last-minute thoughts, anything you'd like to share with the audience, right? What should they take away from this, 15-minute session?
There's so much knowledge out there to continue. I'm sure you can reach out to any of us, but know that, especially once you've been through it, and I was an entrepreneur before I joined Fifth Wall, you really want others to succeed too, because it is an incredibly exciting, dynamic journey, and I think don't be afraid to ask for help or tips. It's often the easiest thing that somebody can do.
Just always be learning. That's always be learning and changing. I've evolved and changed so much in this journey, and I've got a lot more to do. So the better you can change, the faster you can change. You just got to do that, and you'll see the results. Your gut will tell you what you need to do differently. You'll see the results if you do it. So,
one more, which is I was told on my first day of a job 10 years ago, which is feedback is a gift. And I think that's so trite, but it is true every single time, whether that's from your employees, if you're a leader, or your customers, or your investors, or whatever. Like, always be asking for that feedback, because the worst is if you don't, and then you're 6 months down a project that was not the smartest idea.
Yeah. The only thing I'll leave the audience with is you're in good company if things don't necessarily work out, right? There are lots and lots and lots of entrepreneurs who weren't successful the first, second, or third time, but they were successful the fourth because they continued to try. So you are in very, very good company, and don't be discouraged if you've got to pivot, if you've got to start over. That's part of the process. It's completely natural. So with that, I want to thank you guys for listening. Please also thank Natalie Brusk and Abraham Jankans.